Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back for another positive talk. We've got two today, one right now and then one right after I jump off of this one. So, super excited. Best way to start a Monday, I think, with a positive talk. For those of you that have not already joined Positive Space, make sure you do that so that you can partake in the one-on-one interactions with me and my leadership team, as well as the daily activities that we do in that space to grow individuals towards their goals. So we've definitely been putting a lot of effort into that community this year, and I'm excited for you all to check it out. So follow the link on my page, and if you have any questions about signing up, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk to any of you about Positive Space and all that it entails, and I would love to see you all there. So let's see if we can get then we'll go ahead and get started. Leaning back. Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, evening.
Yeah, it's nighttime for me over here.
Well, I'll have some coffee now to keep you awake.
Perfect. How's your day starting off so far?
Well, nothing like taking a child to the dentist and doing the stuff of parenting. That's all fun.
That's actually funny because I actually dated a dentist a while back and he was from Australia, so
Salt of the earth people, right? Yeah.
he used to talk about how Americans are babies because in Australia you guys don't numb the mouth for most procedures. And over here it's just like even when people are just having a checkup, they're like, "Can you numb my mouth?"
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, so
No,
apparently we're babies.
Yeah, wow. That and possibly with American style football, maybe, I don't know, compared to ours. Yeah. So
Also,
thanks so much for having me.
yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we were able to connect in that coaching group, and now we can do a positive talk and get to know each other here.
Yes. Yes.
I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself so people know who you are, and then we can dive into a conversation.
Yes. Well, first of all, just thank you, Ben, so much for having me. And everyone, it's lovely to see like the rapidly sort of scrolling list of names joining. I'm Phil McAuliffe, and I am I'm Australian. Currently, I live in Canberra, Australia's capital city, on the traditional country of the Ngunnawal people. And that traditional acknowledgement of the country that I live, work, and raise my family is really important because as a country like the US, this continent was inhabited before European settlement, and it is important that we recognize that and do what we can to make this a place, particularly like in this instance, Australia, a place that all people feel that they belong. The concept of belonging is really important to me because I am the loneliness guy. And I started the loneliness guy a few years ago in response to me being lonely. So this is really odd. Like I really don't know how to introduce myself, but I was like, I'm gay. I have a partner. And we have two kids. I have been married to a woman. I was married to a woman for 16 and a half years, pretty much 16 and a half wonderful years, and lived the life of a diplomat. I've been an Australian diplomat. My ex-wife, she's in diplomacy. And when not living in Canberra, I've lived in Caracas in Venezuela, lived in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Darwin in the Northern Territory of Australia, Seoul in South Korea and Wellington in New Zealand. So for much of the last 23 years, I've lived overseas.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that time kind of felt like I belonged everywhere, but belonged nowhere. And when life came calling, as life often does, when you need someone to have a chat with, I realized, or it felt, and it felt very real, that I had nobody in my life who I could actually pick up the phone and talk to, without kind of going through that whole, like the conversations that you have. It's like, how's work? How are the kids? How's like life, and how are your parents and stuff? Oh, like, okay, well, that's an hour gone now, so better
Yeah.
jump off. So I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could do that with. And I realized that the thoughts and feelings that I had were loneliness, which, can I swear?
Yeah.
Like,
Go
I'm gonna swear, like, again, while your the dentist that you dated was saying that that Americans are babies. Yeah, like, sometimes Americans have tender ears. So like the thoughts and feelings of loneliness were shit.
Yeah.
Were really, really, really shit. And I thought, right, like, I would rather almost anything else in, like, I would rather be depressed, I'd rather be anxious than lonely, because there are pills for depression, and there's pills for anxiety to help you manage those, and give you some space as you're working through those issues. But with loneliness, it's like, that's it. It's like there's no other way of doing it. So there's an awful lot right there. I'll stop and I'll have a sip of my coffee, but give you a chance to ask a question or something.
That's a lot to go off of, and I haven't traveled as many countries as you have, but I've definitely lived in several different states where I picked up, moved, recreated community connections, and each time I moved, I definitely felt the loneliness of, I felt like every connection I had to make, I had to re-explain myself and
Yes.
re-educate people on myself. And instead of just getting to exist and have normal conversations, I felt like I was having to play the catch-up game with everyone. And when I moved back home to where I was familiar with people from my childhood, it was kind of nice to have that reconnect where people understood why I enjoy the things that I enjoy. And like, when I make a reference to something, people automatically get it, and it doesn't take 30 minutes of explanation. So I can definitely relate to that. And for me, when I looked at my past and all the travel, I was looking at, wow, I've gotten very versed at creating community, because I had to adapt to new communities each time. And I almost felt like my identity didn't matter in those times, because I was trying to adapt to their space. They've already got a group of friends that I'm now joining. So for me, I think that it took coming back and creating my own space to gain my self-awareness again. Because I think through all those moves, I slowly made myself small to fit into any type of space and any type of group, and lost a lot of identity of who I was, because every space was different. So I didn't feel like if I had a strong identity that I would fit really well in spaces. So for me, coming back and realizing I can make my own space, I was planning on staying here longer term. I realized that I had missed out on a lot. And looking back, like, loneliness was definitely something that I felt, because sometimes the energy required to just connect with a group you don't have a lot in common with was exhausting. And the loneliness and exhaustion were kind of like both things that I wasn't enjoying. So it was like, where do I sit in that, in trying to discover how that works? But it's definitely been a journey for sure.
Yeah, and what you're describing there, Ben, is really common. This kind of downward spiral, and almost like a self-perpetuating descent, where you're exhausted because you're lonely, but connection seems exhausting.
Yeah.
And maybe I need a bit more coffee to speak English properly, but yeah, like, you know, like and it's simple. Loneliness is simple. At its very core, loneliness's job is telling us as humans, and I simply do not buy that someone says, I don't feel lonely and I've never felt lonely. Because if that's like those two tenses, then at some point you will feel lonely. All humans experience loneliness. It is as elemental to us as humans as hunger and thirst. And to say to someone, to say that, no, I don't feel lonely, it's akin to saying, no, I never feel hungry.
Yeah.
Great. However, it's there. So if you don't eat, you will feel hungry. If you don't drink something, you will feel thirsty.
Yeah. I feel like,
and if you don't connect, you will feel lonely.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people during the pandemic got a good taste of what loneliness was because they didn't realize that they connected with the Starbucks barista. They connected with the person sitting next to them at work. Though it might not be a deep connection, those small things filled your cup enough to get through each day. Yep. But then when the pandemic hit and most of us got put into our homes, sitting alone, only connecting through virtual screens, I think that loneliness became such a strong thing that people felt that they really didn't realize how important just the small little encounters you made throughout your day were to their ability to kind of maneuver their life through each day.
This is such a good point. I was at I wasn't at the conference. I dialed into the conference. It was based in Canada, and I forget the academic's name, but based out of the University of British Columbia. And they did a study last year, and they shared it at this Canadian conference, talking about the social benefits of incidental connection, incidental contact in your day. And I say this to my followers all the time. The world can be a place where you can kind of just sail on through. You can have, you know, put your headphones on and, you know, go for your walk. You can, you know, you could do things online. You don't necessarily, and you can have things delivered to your door, left at your door, so you don't actually have to deal with a human. Now, in the case of a global health crisis, with, you know, something that's really contagious, that can actually be quite good. However, we do need to actually have that kind of connection. And this University of British Columbia study showed measured the benefit of someone saying, you know, I'm Australian, so, you know, g'day, how you going? To someone. And it was, you know, a random person walking towards someone involved in the study. And the person involved in the study would say to the random person, g'day, how you going? Or, you know, hi, how you going in the Canadian context. And then maybe 20 meters away, a researcher would go up to the person who hello was said to, and they would ask, like, how do you feel? And then they would actually go and talk to people who witnessed the transaction. Everybody involved in that transaction, the simple act of saying good morning, the simple act of saying hello, the simple act of like, how you going? Or, you know, how you doing or something, gives benefit to the person saying it, to the person receiving it, and to the people witnessing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, it's been a little while since I've been in the US, but here, one of the major supermarket chains, you know, they've always got the self-checkout, where you can go with a basket and, you know, your 8 items or less and check yourself out. But now they've introduced ones where you can wheel your trolley. We call them trolleys, you call them carts.
Yeah.
Wheel your trolley up to the checkout itself, place it on your own conveyor belt, and then do it yourself. And so as simple as saying to my audience and my followers, it's like, choose the checkout with the person.
Yeah.
And say hello. Yes, it feels weird, it feels awkward, and you're kind of putting yourself out of your comfort zone. But loneliness comes from taking small choices. Oftentimes, loneliness comes from taking small choices to avoid that little discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when it came to just the grocery store, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when they started dividing aisles, and it was very awkward to where I started developing anxiety about the grocery store, because something that I was so used to connecting with people, like I would say that I'm introverted, but very extroverted when it comes to being out in public, but then I need to recharge afterwards.
Yeah.
But removing that interaction altogether, and like feeling like only one person can go down an aisle, it was almost like you needed to stay 10 feet away from one another. Like, it started to give me anxiety, whereas before it used to like soothe that loneliness, and then like it added something even more negative on top of the loneliness. It's like, here's some anxiety, because now you're terrified to go near strangers because you don't want to get them sick, you don't want them to get you sick. And I was just like, wow, this is a change. And
Yeah.
I worked for a company where my team, we were responsible for making all the adjustments within our company so that depression and all of that loneliness stuff wasn't sinking in. So whereas before we could just connect, now we're having to add activities to connect, because before you could just say hey to the person on the like same aisle as you.
Yeah.
In the office. When you're on your computer and you only have Zoom calls for meetings, you're not getting that one-on-one, just like, hey, how are you doing conversation.
You're not
So
getting the
we started adding
banter.
activities.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, you know, I quit I used to be, you know, I worked in the Australian Public Service as a government worker for 23 years, and I quit that last year. And, you know, there were many things about that job that I do not miss now. But one of the things that I do miss is, you know, this is my office now. Like, this is my office. It's the kitchen table. And, you know, there's very few people here, you know, like the kitchen's just there. And it is, you know, just that kind of incidental stuff. But, and the irony of like, beyond that, sort of at a more macro level, the irony of working on loneliness is that it's incredibly lonely.
Yes.
And because there's very few people, like Canberra is like Washington, it's a government town. And that's great. Canberra is like the most wonderful place to live ever. And no apologies, like if you can hear like chirping and bird noise outside, it's like, you know, just the friendly rosellas and magpies and stuff that just like, it's the Australian bush that we live in. It's awesome. But there's very few people like me doing this work. There's very few people like me in the world doing this work. But there's very few people here in Canberra. If they are in Australia, they're in Sydney, which is 3 hours drive away, or Melbourne, which is 7 hours drive away. And, you know, that's close-ish, but, you know, I also work with people who are in the UK, in Canada, in the US. You know, it's great. You have these great connections with people kind of doing this, maybe without, you know, the audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you know, the connection that you get is a bit different. But I need to actively search for those bits of connection. And critically, because connection actually happens when I show up just as I am in that moment, not pretending to be someone, not pretending to have, frankly, all of my shit together, not pretending to have the right word at the right time in the right way to make you feel the right way. You know, if I'm having a bad day, allowing myself to have a bad day, if you know, whatever it is, like showing up as me. Because if I'm not showing up as me, the connection that I get doesn't touch the sides. Like
Yep.
it's connection, but it's not for me in that moment. And it's performative. And that was actually like the source of my loneliness. So as a diplomat, as someone who worked in diplomacy, like cool glasses, suit, you know, erudite, could say the right words at the right time to the right people. I would go to meetings and my name would be on nameplates. There'd be an Australian flag near me. And, you know, what I'd say would have the weight of Australia. And that was awesome. Like I'm from a tiny country town of like 750 people. And like I'd be doing this in Seoul and Tokyo and Hong Kong and Bangkok and stuff, and just like going, who made me? Who decided that this was the thing that, you know, a kid from Lockhart could do? But after a while, like somewhere, like after doing that for years, somewhere like I got lost.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, me like wearing the masks, me showing up in the world, because we were told overtly that there is no place for you in this job. You need to be like, you're always on, you're always representing Australia, you're always like, whatever you say, do, however you act, reflects on your country, and not just you, but how your family does too. It's a lot to put on people, and loneliness, like disconnection from self, is almost an inevitable byproduct or result of that. And when we feel disconnected with self, loneliness is not far away.
Yeah. That's like when people say like you can be in a crowded room and still feel completely alone. And like that's one of the things that I kept trying to explain to people when I was dealing with loneliness, that because a lot of times when I would try to describe what I was going through, I'd get slapbacks of, you have this many followers, how can you possibly be lonely? I'm like, followers do not equate to anything when it comes to loneliness. I mean, I think anyone in the LGBT community or someone who lives within a minority group surrounded by people who are not like them knows what it's like to be in a space where no one understands you, to where you just exist in someone else's world and you just are there. It's not a form of connection with people. It's a form of feeling even more alone when you're standing in a crowd of tons of people and you still can't connect with someone on an authentic level. It's just like hard to explain. And I tell people all the time, like one of my favorite memories was when I went to an event where everyone was content creators. Everyone did exactly what I was doing. And like we met through a coaching thing. I started enjoying those just because I didn't have to say something. Someone else would just be talking and telling a story, and I'm sitting there laughing, and my energy is all excited and high because I've had those experiences and I'm hearing someone else say it without me having to explain it. And I'm like, wow, this is a very different type of connection. And like you were saying, I'm here in Richmond and there's not a lot of gay coaches. There's definitely not a lot of content creators. And then just finding people who can relate on any level at all is nice, just because you're like, wow, I'm not the only one. And a lot of times when you find that, you like latch on so quickly because you're like, I need this energy because I haven't had it with anyone in so long. So
Yeah.
I can definitely relate there.
And I think something you're saying there, Ben, is really, really important. And I just want to come back to it. And it goes to that point that we were talking about right at the beginning about the exhaustion, like the dance that loneliness dances with a few partners, but exhaustion is one of them. And you know, when you're putting yourself out there to put yourself into situations where you're meeting new people because you've moved, you've started a new job, you've done all of these things, loneliness often, I want to say manifests, but that's not the right word. Loneliness often comes to our attention from times of change. And we feel our loneliness most acutely during change. And that is perfectly understandable. But when you're tired and you've just moved and you've got to put yourself out there in whatever context, like, you know, online or, you know, community group or whatever. And, you know, it's exhausting introducing yourself.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's exhausting, like physically getting yourself there. But in doing that, you have to wrestle with, also you need to wrestle with judgment. And what will you think of me? Will we be besties, or are you going to hate me?
Yep.
You know, and then, you know, there's a fair bit of, you know, there's latitude in that spectrum there. But, you know, are we going to be, you know, Christmasing together forevermore? Are we going to go, you know, on holidays together? You know, like, or, you know, or you know, we're going to be, you know, on the Real Housewives of Canberra or the Real Housewives of Richmond and, like, you know, at each other, or something like that. But it's exhausting putting yourself out there, and then sort of continuing to function as a human being. But when you are in that kind of, and like, as you said, a minority, or, you know, somehow, you know, feeling on the outer compared to everyone around you, it can be really, really exhausting because of that judgment that comes with it. And so when we enter into safe queer spaces, however we identify as part of the LGBTIQA plus community, like at once we can feel at home, but then we kind of have to, like, you know, sort ourselves out in that kind of nonsensical social stratification.
Yeah.
That is exhausting, and we risk judgment and all that kind of stuff. And it is simply easier to get through the tough moment, to put the mask on, to perform the role, and just get through the moment. And for me, all the work that I've done within myself, the work that I do supporting people across both platforms, on the Loneliness Guy, so here, and on the Lonely Diplomat, is all about saying, you know, the world really needs you without your mask. Take your mask off. Let us see you. Be bold, be courageous, be absolutely awesomely yourself, even though it's scary, even though you don't know what words to use or how to say it, because the world needs you to be you.
Yeah.
I
think that if you put a mask on, the exhaustion that you already have to go through in connecting with people, then that exhaustion will just carry on even longer, because now you're performing, and it's not like being anything other than yourself takes a lot more energy than just being an authentic version of yourself. So yes, you might not get as many connections of people that align with you right away because you're not putting on an act for them, but the connections you will make in the long run will be authentic connections where being yourself is exactly what they want you to be.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier to like walk through on a daily basis than the exhaustion of putting on multiple masks.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm in an office. Hey, I'm out with this group of friends, this group of friends.
What are my lines in this context? Like, you know, how did I show up last time? And what are they expecting me to do? Life gets a whole lot easier. Life got a whole lot easier for me when I took the masks off. And I'm not going to say that that was easy.
Yeah.
Like if this was a movie montage, it would be, you know, the triumph over adversity. It was hard, bloody work. It was scary. It was awful. But my God, has it been worth it?
Yeah.
Because
I always tell people, like, the LGBT community, when it comes to the mask removing, like that started when we were very, very young. So like the understanding what is a mask and what is the real me, at some point that becomes very confusing, because it's like, okay, I kind of like this, but I was doing it because I didn't want someone to find out about me. So is this a mask, or is this just a part of me that's like doesn't align with all the rest? And it gets really confusing. So when you're peeling back, like there's like a rediscovery like time where you have to rediscover your passions, rediscover who you really are and what really does bring you to life. And when I'm working with clients, like some of the questions I ask, people are they're like, I have no clue. And like some of them are like simple things like, what makes you happy? And when you're like, I have no clue, that's because society has made us wear so many masks that we've forgotten who the real person under that mask is. Like we've convinced ourselves that the mask is part of us, and that's a journey in itself to like take that off and figure out who you are again.
And you can take you can identify some masks. And this is, I say this about loneliness. Sorry, my mind is going like 30 miles an hour and my mouth can't keep up. But one of the things about loneliness is, or any kind of discomfort, but I'm going to speak specifically about loneliness, is because it makes us feel so shit. Loneliness is at its very core, and this goes straight to the stigma of loneliness, and this is what I do. I destigmatize loneliness. I'm here for these conversations because loneliness makes us feel like shit, and at its very core makes us question our worthiness for love and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And by coming out, and this is what I say to my followers, it's like, to move past your loneliness, you need to own it. You need to own it, because if you don't own it, it is sure as eggs owning you.
Mm-hmm.
It is showing up and you're completely oblivious, because it's like pulling the levers, doing all of the things, influencing your words, thoughts, and actions. But owning your loneliness, and I am working to envision, like to enact the vision of a world where we own our loneliness in the same way that with the same ease that we can own our hunger and own our thirst. Like, you know, Ben, you could say, you know, it's dinner time. I'm kind of hungry. I've got to jump up. I'm not going to judge you for being hungry. Like, you know, and, you know, I've just like run 5Ks. I'm a bit thirsty. So, you know, no, what a terrible human you are for having thirst. Like, no. But one of the things, because loneliness is its very, very, very core, we have made it as a society mean that we are unworthy of love and belonging. That's not an easy truth, but it's not an easy concept to sit within yourself. But also, when it not only just within yourself, but when someone around you comes out as lonely, we are forced to confront the quality of our own connection. And we might realize that the quality of our connection to self, to those most important to us and to our communities, or is not how we want it to be. That's really confronting as well. So to avoid all of that, we just don't talk about it, which then the person experiencing like the lonely mind, the lonely heart, the lonely soul feels like they are the only person ever in the history of the world who have felt these feelings and think these thoughts, which is blatantly not true. We all feel this, but we don't have the language to talk about it. We don't, you know, and we don't have the language to think about it. We don't, or you know, this was my frustration. Like there's a whole lot of great research being done pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, now post-pandemic, on loneliness and how it affects humans, right?
Yeah.
However we identify as a human, we all feel it. But one of the things here is that it stays at that academic level. And academics, like governments, are cottoning on to the fact that loneliness, the US Surgeon General, is one within the US context. Here in Australia, in Japan, in the UK, there's ministries for loneliness. There's not a ministry for loneliness here, but it's within like our health department. But one of the things here is that, you know, academics speak to public policy. And, you know, which is great. Like I've worked in public policy for 23 years, like a bit of an expert. But the regular person, when they're feeling like they need some connection, reaches for the device that we're now talking to, like now. They don't sort of jump on the, you know, Oxford University's latest loneliness research and goes, oh, 70% of respondents also, like in my situation, also feel lonely. Oh, that's much better. Like, no. So what I'm here to do is to give us the language, work out the language ourselves, to allow us to come out as lonely, to own our loneliness. Because it's only after we own our loneliness can we then take steps to listen to it, because this is all loneliness's job is. It's for us to listen. We just need to shut up, stop, pay it some attention, which, not going to say that's like a day at Disneyland. It's absolutely not. That can be very upsetting.
Yeah.
But that's why we need help. And sometimes that help, like when we say help, that doesn't need to be a coach. That doesn't need to be a therapist. That needs to be someone who has earned the right to hear your story. That's it. Because saying it out loud is itself therapeutic. And then from there, rather than judgment, because, you know, loneliness loves judgment. It absolutely feeds off judgment. What kills judgment is curiosity. Be curious about your loneliness, and the judgment goes, and suddenly you're just left with fact, with data, with information. And then, like, we go, okay, like the loneliness that we've been thinking is a pretty awful way of telling us that I've been missing this kind of connection. Right. Now that I know this, how do I then go about getting that connection? Without judgment, with an abundance of curiosity, self-love, grace, like being okay to fail. And that's what I do as part of my connection plan. That's my, you know, I've got blog, podcast, all this kind of stuff to give some broader awareness. But if you want to know what your loneliness is trying to tell you, then you need to do that work. And the temptation is to read the book, listen to a blog, listen to a podcast, watch a Instagram live, you know, do all of the things quietly, gather all the information quietly and just sort of internalize it and then go, is it working? Part of it is like you actually then need to do it.
Yep.
And that's where the fun is. The doing of connection is where the fun is, but oh my God, is it hard? Like, because we wrestle with vulnerability. It takes courage to be you. You know, however we are, like, you know, it can feel that the world has invested in you, me, us, being anything else but who we are.
Yeah. I always tell people, like, when it comes to like the loneliness thing, like, wave your freak flag, because like that's the only way other people who are similar to you will find you. Like, I think I spent so long searching for other people, and searching is exhausting.
Yes.
When I decided to be the person that people can come to, when I was like, you know what, I'm just going to yell out whatever I am and whatever I'm looking for and whatever special connection I'm looking for in individuals, I'm just going to say it out loud and let the world know that I'm looking for hiking partners. I am a book nerd. I do this. I am an activist. I'm doing this. I'm doing, like, as soon as I start just yelling all these things out and projecting it into the world, I started to have people come to me, and I started to connect with people, versus before, where I felt like I was the only one who still liked that type of stuff. I was the only one doing this type of work. I'm like, I was telling my boyfriend, the nice thing about joining that coaching thing was I was just like, wow, these people are talking about what I used to think was my only struggle, because a lot of times I worked with other coaches, but they weren't gay coaches. So when I projected to them like what struggles I was having, they're like, oh, that's not a struggle I face. So I started to feel like I was the only one with it. But when I started working with other people who are in the same line of work, in the same community, like, the more similarities I had, the less alone I felt, because I was like, oh, there are other people who are struggling with this and overcoming the problems that may feel like I can't overcome them because there's this wall of something about me that makes me different than the people who don't have the wall in front of them. So projecting it really helped me. And from Clubhouse, the app that kind of became very popular during the pandemic, I got on there and was like scrolling through rooms, and I couldn't find any that really interested me. And then I just created a title myself and sat there for about 10 seconds before like 20 people just jumped in. And the conversations just started happening. And I didn't even really have to lead the room. It was just like, I just had to title it so that people knew that there was something about that topic being said in that room. And people started showing up.
Yeah. I love that. I love that, because essentially what you're saying is that you started showing up in spaces, online, offline, like in real life, but, you know, as you. And the connection, and this absolutely aligns with my own experience. It's like when we resolve to show up as we are in that moment, the connection that comes from it after potentially an uncomfortable few moments. And I spent my life, Ben, avoiding those like 3-dot moments. I call them, where, you know, I say something, and then, you know, if it's in a normal conversation where no one's like texting, but if someone's like, where, you know, you could sort of see someone like go, you know, sit back and take a big sharp deep breath in, and I'm like, oh God, like the judgment and stuff, or you know, on texting, and like, you know, you see the three dots going. And now, I mean, it's still confronting at times, but, you know, if I remind myself in those times, I'm like, no, I have shown up as me. I've asked for what I need in this moment. It is not a reflection of my worth. It's not a reflection of my worthiness for love and belonging. If it's a no or a no thanks, or if it's a fuck off, like whatever it is, like, no, I know that I'm worthy of love and belonging right now, just as I am, as beautifully or and awesomely incomplete and imperfect as I am. And having grown up essentially in diplomacy, where anything short of perfection was a failure. And, you know, even the road into that job, you know, had to get great marks at school to get into the right university, had to then do a good course at the right university and get good marks in that university to then be competitive enough to apply, let alone get an interview, let alone like get in. And that experience was like constantly dangled over us. You know, if you don't like doing this job, there are 10,000 more people who would sell their mothers to be where you are now. So how about you sit down and shut the fuck up and do your job? That's like, they didn't say it, that's most undiplomatic. But that was the intention. That was the message.
And I think
like if you
that
don't
a lot
like
of places
leave.
do that.
Yeah.
Like that's how a lot of places hold people in the positions that they're in. Make you realize that you're one of a million and that you're easily replaceable. And they put that level of like, wow, I'm so lucky to have this existence in this lifetime. And then you kind of throw away whatever they tell you need to throw away to exist in that space. And a lot of times that's your authentic identity that gets thrown away, and that is not something worth throwing away.
No. And I now like very, very, very happily refuse to throw that away now.
Yeah.
So if me being me makes people uncomfortable, and I want to speak a point on that. Now that I raise it, I want to speak on that. But so I often get, particularly from Americans, why loneliness? Loneliness is like it's so like low energy. And, you know, I've had people saying that, you know, essentially loneliness is re-traumatizing, and engaging with people in it like re-engages the trauma. And I heard about this on the podcast, I think offline with John Favreau, just a few weeks ago. And it was talking about like societies, and I think by societies saying American society, but to an extent here in Australia as well, to a great extent here in Australia, talking about our inability to sit with discomfort, that life must be entertaining. Life must be always like a rollicking hoot where, you know, we absolutely must be always like having the time of our life and like laughing uproariously with our friends all of the time. And if we're not, something like we're a failure. And it's curious, there's more and more stuff coming out on loneliness, overtly saying loneliness. However, previous to this, like it was all about, you know, connection, like getting connected, being connected, feeling connected, how to connect. Let's connect. We haven't connected for a while. And that's great, but it's wanting the cure without owning the cause, which goes to my very central point of we need to own loneliness.
Yeah.
Because you can't have the cure unless you own the symptom. Like if you own the cause. How do you know? Like, yes, we all need connection. How do you know what connection you need unless you've listened to your loneliness?
Yeah.
And taking that hunger and thirst analogy and absolutely throttling it some more. Yep, you're feeling hungry. You can go to, we call it Macca's, so like McDonald's. You can go through drive-through of fast food and you can absolutely shove your face full. You eat, hunger gone. but is it good for you? You're thirsty, you can have a big gulp of soft drink, but, you know, and it will sate your thirst, but is it good for you? And it's the same with loneliness. Like, you know, you feel like you need connection. You can jump on Instagram, you can scroll through and watch some reels, join an Instagram live. Or you can jump on to Grindr, Scruff, whatever it is. You can like get fucked really quickly.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Very conveniently. You can order takeaway food. You can order a book. You can order anything and get it delivered to your house. But is it actually what you need?
Yep.
And so, you know, in a similar way to, like, you know, make good choices when eating, make good choices when drinking, make good choice when lonely, so you get the connection that you actually need. And unless you're owning your loneliness, and this is, I unapologetically call myself the loneliness guy, because I'm here to have these kind of conversations that, like, I'm done. I've spent my entire life pussyfooting diplomatically around the issues without, like, talking about the issues. But not talking about this issue literally kills us.
Yeah.
It significantly puts you at higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. You know, it reduces your longevity by 70%. Smoking reduces your longevity by 50%. Obesity by 10, and alcohol by 20 or 30. Right? This loneliness kills you.
Yep.
And as a society, we suck at talking about it. And I'm here to shake shit up and talk about it by saying the word loneliness as often as possible, to give you and all of your audience the confidence, the courage to go, actually, I kind of sort of maybe, possibly, potentially think that I might be lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Great. You're my people.
You have to own the good, bad, and the ugly of every situation. Like, you can't get out of anything only looking at the good. Like, you can't sugarcoat life and expect to solve the world's problems doing it. And I think, like, looking at politics, and I know that we're getting close to the end, Instagram will literally cut us off at 60 minutes. But when it comes to a lot of problem solving, when it comes to politics, if you're in politics and most of the energy is being spent on being something that you're not because you feel the weight of representing tons of people, like, that takes a lot of energy out of finding a solution that will work. And I've told so many people here in the United States that I feel like there's people in office that have an opinion, but they don't share it because they don't feel like it's an opinion that reflects the whole party that they are supposed to be representative of. So they give these shallow answers that do nothing for change and solving issues. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a point where it's like, are you this or are you this? And there's no in between when it comes to that conversation. And when you can find people to have those types of conversations and you get past that surface level stuff that means nothing because it's all masks, you start to see we're all people and we actually have a lot more in common than we actually believe. But we're so used to looking at other people's masks, making a quick judgment, putting a label on who we believe they are, and then walking away and sitting in our loneliness without making any real connection. And unfortunately, like, society benefits from that. Companies benefit from it. They're like, you're lonely, here's a product, pay us for this. And it's all, like you were saying, the quality of what you're taking in may give you like that blip on the map of like, oh, loneliness gone for a split second, but then it comes right back.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people when you can work with other people and start taking that dive into yourself, and you have to name it. You have to say that this is something I'm struggling with so that you can start to work on it. And that's with anything. And there's so many different surfaces to look into when it comes to yourself as a person. You can't listen to other people and be like, that person's 100% me, because that will never be the case.
And I think a big message here, just to reinforce what you were just saying, loneliness, you know, does make us feel broken.
Yeah.
And I want you to know, Ben, I want you, viewer, to know this. Absolutely. Loneliness does not make you broken. Loneliness makes you human. And like, you're not a broken human. You're human who's having a kind of challenging, uncomfortable moment. Knowing that, you then have a choice. What do you do with that? Do you double down? Do you try retail therapy? Do you try sex? Do you try Netflix? Do you try whatever it is that, you know, working out, travel, gambling, whatever, like, name your vice, drugs, alcohol? Or do you go, okay, I need to do something about this now? And when someone's ready to do something about it, I'm like right here. I'm right here when they're ready. And because seriously, on loneliness, I cannot do anything with someone unless they're at that point themselves.
Agreed. Yeah. I've tried forcing people into that growth, and it never works. No. It's a wasted time, wasted energy, wasted words. It has to be that person's choice and determination to say, hey, this is the problem, I need help. Because otherwise, they're not ready.
No, exactly. Ben, I just know we're going to be running out of time, but a few minutes ago, it was 11 a.m. here. I know that you're big on that. So I took a quick screenshot of it and just sort of marked the moment. So, you know, it's always 11:11 somewhere, right?
That's perfect. Well, I want to say thank you so much for jumping on here and doing this with me. I really appreciated your perspective and everything that you shared in the live. And I've definitely scrolled through tons of your stuff, and I'm just like amazed at everything that you're doing, and really am glad you're out there doing this work. So hopefully people who are watching this connected and feel like they now have a new resource and person to reach out to, because that's the way the world works. We're meant to connect. We're meant to connect with people who know a little bit more so that we can help ourselves get to where we feel happy and feel our most authentic self.
Thank you so much for having me, and viewer, like, thank you so much for spending some time. It's awesome.
Well, you have a good rest of your day. I'm about to jump on another live. And
I saw you're busy.
Wrapping up for the night. So it's great talking to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Be awesome. See you later.